The National Desk, America's News Now.
Police release body camera video in the fatal shooting of a mother-to-be. Now viewers are asking, does it exonerate or indict the officer?
This incident was tragic for everyone involved. Miss Young's family, the officers involved, and their families. Now we must be patient. We have to wait for the investigation to be completed.
Then more Americans living paycheck to paycheck, what the risky behavior says about how the economy is faring. And it's Labor Day weekend, which means packed roads and packed skies. But it's not just airplanes that'll be flying. Coming up, the local police department putting drone surveillance into high gear.
Our police officers will be diligent, visible, and some won't be visible. They'll be firm but fair to make sure everyone has an enjoyable weekend.
This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Right now, an urgent manhunt for a convicted murderer who escaped from a Pennsylvania prison yesterday. 34-year-old Danilo Cavalcante was sentenced to life in prison last week for stabbing his former girlfriend to death in front of her children. He's also wanted for a homicide in Brazil. Authorities now warning that the inmate is considered highly dangerous, issuing a $10,000 reward for his capture. And to Ohio, where a police department has released body cam video of the fatal shooting of a pregnant woman last week. We are not going to show you the shooting itself, but I do want to warn you this video may still be disturbing.
Out of the car. Out of the car.
For what?
Out of the car.
For what?
They said you stole stuff, do not leave. Get out of the car. Then get out. No, then get out. Get out of the car. Get out of the car!
21-year-old Takia Young was shot one time as police say she tried to drive away, but both she and her unborn daughter died at the hospital. Officers were responding to reports that Young was shoplifting alcohol. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation is examining the case. The family had demanded the video be released and now wants criminal charges filed.
They want all the justice that can be fought for and all the justice that can be received for the family. They're going to want that, and they're going to pursue that.
We turn now to FEMA. In focus, concerns that critical funding could run dry. The White House is seeking an additional $4 billion in aid to address natural disasters. The initial request was $12 billion, but it went up after FEMA officials said the agency would be out of money by mid-September. FEMA's current disaster relief fund is at $3.4 billion, but FEMA leaders say the Maui wildfires have caused billions of dollars in damage, and hurricane season is still in full swing. The agency says Congress needs to approve more funding.
We are going to prioritize the remaining funding that's within the disaster relief fund to go to life-saving activities.
Meanwhile, the cleanup for Hurricane Idalia is still just beginning. The price tag for damage and lost output could cost up to $20 billion. But according to Moody's Analytics, that's far less than other hurricanes. Moody's reports last year, Hurricane Ian caused more than $112 billion in damage. The destruction in Florida, something President Biden is expected to see tomorrow, though perhaps not the worst hit areas, with this warning from Florida's governor.
The hardest hit communities, it would be very disruptive to have the whole kind of security apparatus that goes, because there's only so many ways to get into these places. And so what we want to do is make sure that the power restoration continues, that the relief efforts continue, and that we don't have any interruption in that.
Fewer than 100,000 Floridians remain without electricity after Idalia ripped through the state's Big Bend with Category 3 winds. Crews are working around the clock to restore power while relief teams provide shelter, mobile showers, and charging stations. As the Maui fire recovery efforts continue, the number of missing people could drop from almost 400 to fewer than 100 in today's update, according to Governor Josh Green. At first, over 1,000 people were unaccounted for. Then the list was narrowed down to 388 people considered missing. Green says he expects the death toll to stay at 115. We're also learning that many Lahaina public school students have not yet enrolled in another school. Hawaii's Department of Education says more than 1,700 of the nearly 3,000 students who were enrolled at 4 Lahaina public schools have not enrolled in another public school or distance learning. Some may have moved, enrolled in private school, or taken a break. 3 out of 4 of the schools plan to reopen in October. Well, no shortage of headaches for former President Donald Trump, and another one could be brewing. This as calls to keep the leading Republican candidate off the ballot grow louder based on the 14th Amendment's ban on insurrectionists holding public office. Discussions of the amendment are bubbling up across the country, including in New Hampshire, Georgia, Arizona, and Michigan, over challenges compelling election officials to declare Trump ineligible to run. In fact, various secretaries of state say they have started to take steps to prepare for the possibility of administering elections without the GOP frontrunner. Trump has denied wrongdoing regarding the January 6th Capitol attack, and experts say states could expect lawsuits from his legal team should a disqualification be issued. Meantime, another potential thorn in Trump's side, news that his Georgia election interference trial will be visible for all to see. A judge ruling that all court hearings will be fully televised and live streamed to the world, marking the first of the former president's 4 criminal cases in which a judge has allowed cameras in. Hours after the judge made the call, Trump began unleashing a series of posts on his Truth Social platform, pushing back on the several indictments against him, saying, quote, "I am being railroaded by a highly partisan and corrupt system." The unemployment rate has risen at a time when the majority of Americans, they are living paycheck to paycheck. National correspondent Janae Bowens explains the economic shifts.
Threats of a recession appear to have weakened, but other concerns are now in focus. New numbers out Friday show U.S. employers added 187,000 jobs in August. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's a slowdown from the past 2 years of massive job growth.
We lost more full-time jobs in August. In fact, the entirety of the increase in the number of jobs last month was actually due to the fact that we had more part-time workers.
The unemployment rate rose from 3.5% to 3.8%. It's happening as the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates to bring down inflation while trying not to cause massive layoffs.
We saw our central banks print trillions of dollars to buy up the government debt that would actually fund all that spending. We have more dollars chasing the goods and services that are being produced by the economy, and that is driving up prices.
Joel Griffith, an economic research fellow with the Heritage Foundation, says what he calls the massive spending of the federal government is to blame. But President Joe Biden is remaining optimistic about Bidenomics.
It's working. Key pillar of Bidenomics is empowering and educating workers who are the backbone of this country.
But some Americans find it's a message that's hard to connect with.
I think the average American is feeling it right now.
New research from financial services company Lending Club shows 61% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. This includes 8 in 10 low-wage workers who make less than $50,000 per year, and 4 in 10 high-income Americans who make more than $100,000 per year. The report shows inflation pushing up prices plays a big role.
Economic experts tell me if the federal government does not find a way to cut spending, they predict massive tax increases or even higher inflation.
Really big implications there, Janae. With high prices being the big issue for Americans, when can we expect to get a better understanding of whether that will improve?
Right, so the next inflation report is expected in just a few days. That's on September 13th. And inflation right now is at 3.2%. The government's goal is 2%. Amira.
All right, Janae, thank you for keeping us informed, as always. Janae Bowens live in D.C. for us. President Biden is proposing a new nationwide staffing requirement for nursing homes. An American Health Care Association survey last year found 90% of nursing homes have at least moderate staffing shortages. Facilities would have to provide each patient at least 33 minutes of care a day from a registered nurse and at least 2 hours and 27 minutes of care from a nurse aide each day. The nurse nursing home industry says a staffing ratio is impossible to implement without more funding. This policy would cost them more than $40 billion over 10 years. 75% of homes would have to ramp up staffing to meet the standards. Pennsylvania will end its public support for centers that give abortion alternatives like life counseling centers and maternity homes. For almost 30 years, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle in the Keystone State have supported such programs, but this will stop on December 31st. Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro says his administration is steadfast in supporting abortion access and will no longer subsidize organizations that oppose it. Meanwhile, Alabama's strict abortion ban goes into effect today, punishable with a sentence of 10 to 99 years. Almost all abortions are outlawed, with an exception for procedures to save the life of the mother. Seattle is on pace for an ominous record, the most homicides ever in its history. The Seattle Police Officers Guild estimates the department has lost around 600 officers since 2020, and the lack of enforcement is having bad repercussions on the streets. The National Desk's Jeremy Harris has the story.
There are still unanswered questions about what led up to the shooting at a senior apartment on 3rd Avenue in Belltown.
People are asking what happened.
Andrea Suarez of We Heart Seattle does outreach on 3rd Avenue.
It's a no-rules playground.
She says drugs, street crimes, and violence go hand in hand.
And the only way we're going to get around this is to elect city council who will support our police department.
18 people were shot in 3 separate mass shootings in Seattle just since July. Today's shooting in Belltown marks the 50th homicide this year, and the city is at pace to have 75 homicides before the end of the year. We're looking at potentially record homicides, and we're down 600 officers. Do you see a direct link between those?
100%.
Mike Solon of the Seattle Police Officers Guild says the city's police ranks are depleted and criminals are taking advantage.
And the criminals do not fear police officers anymore. They know we don't have the ability to enforce the law. This is why we're going to see record homicide levels.
Tom Graff of Belltown United says city leadership knows the concerns of street violence.
They say hire private security, and I say no, this is your job, and you need to enforce the rules.
That's not normal for a functioning society. It's not.
The city has promised efforts to improve safety downtown and specifically on 3rd Ave. The question people here are asking is what will change and when.
The community has been screaming to the city council, to the West Precinct, to the chief of police, to the mayor, that the conditions in this area of Belltown are unacceptable.
Jeremy Harris reporting there. This weekend, if you are at a holiday gathering in the Big Apple, you may notice someone or something watching over you. The New York Police Department has announced it will use drones to check on large gatherings in an effort to curb the rise in gun violence associated with holiday weekends. Officers will pilot the devices in response to phoned-in complaints. Critics say flying over backyard barbecues is an invasion of privacy, but New York is not alone. According to the ACLU, around 1,400 police departments across the country are currently using drones in some form. Coming up, the amount of families crossing the southern border is raising concerns. What's driving it and how it'll impact the presidential race. Then Labor Day weekend is here, the dramatic spike in air travel and what to expect if you are hitting the road. And a new California bill to combat violence has business owners concerned it could make crime worse. We're back in just 90 seconds. New alarming developments at America's southern border tonight. For the first time since President Biden took office, families have become the single largest demographic group trying to enter the U.S., more so than individual migrants. Why is it happening, and how will it impact the race for the White House? Our Scott Thuman takes a look.
This week, new images of migrants being flown back to South and Central America after U.S. officials denied their claims. Meanwhile, the number of migrant families reaching the southern border hitting a record high. According to preliminary data reported by the Washington Post, 91,000 migrants who were part of family groups were arrested in August, adding to the overall 30% increase in total apprehensions over the last 2 months. Some encouraged that President Biden vowed not to separate families, or told by smugglers they're less likely to be rejected. In New York City, which has received over 100,000 migrants since spring of last year, fights over how to handle the influx, and demonstrators demanding the federal government give work authorizations to asylum seekers.
What do we want? What do we want?
In Washington, President Biden is under mounting pressure, including from Democrats like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who says immigration is arguably this administration's weakest issue.
The president has asked and has said, hey, let's do this in a bipartisan way. Here's the funding that we would need to actually try to fix what's going on. And they refuse.
The race for the White House takes.
The problems highlighted in the first Republican debate.
What would you do about the 7 million who are here?
The first thing we need to do is to stop any more from coming.
Some vowing to even send the U.S. military into Mexico to stop the flow of drugs and weapons.
Yes, and I will do it on day one. Here's the thing. The cartels are killing tens of thousands of our fellow citizens.
Though voters soon to have the loudest say on who can best handle this surge. In Washington, Scott Thuman for the National Desk.
Scott, thank you. Taking a look at the latest travel numbers as we head into Labor Day weekend, you can expect the most traffic on the road to happen today, but that'll start to die down in the next 3 hours or so. As for gas prices, they are averaging $3.82 per gallon today, according to AAA, and that more than 250,000 flights have been scheduled through Tuesday. TSA expected to screen more than 14 million passengers and crew between today and Wednesday. Officials say that's an 11% increase over the last year. Air travel is proceeding relatively smoothly despite the impacts of Idalia, so that's very good news. And new food stamp requirements are now in effect. Congress changed SNAP rules so low-income Americans have to work to get food stamps. Childless adults under 50 have to prove they are working at least 80 hours a month or are enrolled in an education or training program. Homeless people, veterans, and adults under 24 who aged out of the foster care system are exempt. More changes are coming next month. And the FDA is behind schedule in finalizing rules prohibiting the sale of menthol cigarettes. A ban was supposed to be in effect last month, but the agency says it's still a few months away. Flavored cigarettes were banned in 2009, but menthol was exempted. Though fewer people are smoking cigarettes, the percentage of menthol smokers has increased. Interest is accruing on student loan debt across the country once again. After 3 years, the federal policy to keep interest rates at 0% has ended. Payments are also set to resume starting October 1st. Despite the increases in national interest rates over the last year, these loan interest rates will be equal to what they were when they were paused back in March of 2020. It's already been established that migraines is a risk factor for stroke in younger women. Medical reporter Barbara Morse learned that now researchers want to find out if that risk goes up dramatically after menopause.
If you've ever had a migraine, you know it. This type of headache can be intense and debilitating, and it's common.
It affects up to 14% of the general population, and it's 2 to 3 times more common in women.
Which is why women are the focus of a new study out of Rhode Island Hospital.
It's just getting off the ground.
Dr. Tracy Madsen is leading this national research on a possible connection between migraine in younger women and stroke later in life. They have a pool of 160,000 older women already enrolled in the Women's Health Initiative.
We know that things like high blood pressure, diabetes, abnormal heart rhythms, lack of physical activity. We know a lot about the kind of traditional risk factors for stroke in older women.
Now they're hoping to determine if they should add migraine to the list.
We'll look at risk factors. We'll look at women and whether or not they had a diagnosis of migraine when they were enrolled. We'll look at whether or not they were having active headache symptoms. Some of the medications that women might be taking for migraine, how do those affect the risk for stroke down the road? Do they help? Do they hurt? We don't have those answers.
Over the next 2 years, they hope to have some answers.
The idea is that we'll have more information about how to counsel women with migraine, what to tell them about what medications to take, what to tell them about how to manage their risk factors.
This research is made possible by the American Heart Association, one of 7 research projects it's funding, looking at the links between migraine, stroke, and cardiovascular disease in women. I'm medical reporter Barbara Morse.
Coming up, legislation introduced in response to violence as business owners across California concerned it could make crime worse. We'll be right back. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America.
Enough is enough. We need to make crime illegal again in California.
As California businesses continue getting broken into and stolen from, small business owners and lawmakers from across the state have been rallying against a policy they say could be dangerous for them. A state senator introduced a bill to stop workers from confronting shoplifters to decrease violence and prevent death. But those opposed to the bill say if it passes, it will encourage shoplifting and increase crime.
A post on X by the Libs of TikTok account has some calling for a change in leadership at John Glenn Elementary. We found court documents from Payne County that show Shane Mernon, now principal at John Glenn, faced child porn charges in 2002. Even though records say the case was dismissed, a parent who spoke with us is still worried.
I feel like there was something there. You know, for that to even be brought up, whether it was 20 years ago, it's there.
The Western Heights School District shared a statement on Facebook in response to that social media post. In it, the district superintendent says normal background checks were part of Mernon's hiring process, and the district became aware of the dropped charges. However, the superintendent said Mernon came with strong recommendations and qualifications. The district also addressed the issue in a statement online back on June 12th, when they announced Mernon was hired. But a parent tells us she feels the communication should have been more direct.
Security footage shows this flexible, fixated crook in action. First scaling his way into Big Mario's and then slithering his way to the back safe, stealing all the cash from this shop's much anticipated reopening day.
The timing, you're like, wow, day one, this is it. One day of business and here we go. Welcome to being open.
This burglary lasted a total of 7 minutes. Video shows this crook not only grabbing $1,000 out of the safe, but snatching some soda cans on his way out.
We're doing credit card only today. We're just like, you know what, it's not even worth it today.
A new website is helping the government collect information about UFOs. The Pentagon's office that studies unidentified anomalous phenomena launched the site to provide information about their discoveries to the public. It will also allow government employees and contractors to submit reports about UAP sightings. Coming up, Taylor Swift's new movie is already breaking records, and it hasn't even been released yet. We'll be right back. Well, this will come as no surprise to true Swifties. The much-anticipated Eras Tour concert film, set to be released on October 13th, is already breaking records more than a month before its release. AMC Theater says $26 million worth of tickets were sold yesterday, shattering records for single-day advanced ticket sales revenue. The theater chain says the movie broke the daily record less than 3 hours after tickets first went on sale. In response, AMC says it will be adding extra show times where possible. There you have it, selling out concert venues and movie theaters. T-Swift strikes again. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. Just check your local listings. I'm Amira David. Thanks for watching.